I'm always thinking about waste as part of my work process. It's always there, and what you actually convert to a usable product is very much determined by the relationship with the grower and the quality of the product that comes in. And it's about enjoying the process of preparing it and consuming it. Hi, I'm Luke Burgess. I'm a chef based in Hobart in southern Tasmania. Okay, so here we are midweek with a lot of vegetables that have probably been in the fridge for a week or maybe a touch more. And we're looking at sort of what we're going to do before we go for our next shop at the end of the week or the market, and what's salvageable from some of this stuff that doesn't look like it's actually good enough to cook with. But actually there's a lot of things here that can be done, and there's a lot of opportunity as well. But what we're going to do is just focus on making it as simple as possible, because it's middle of the week. You might just want to put most of it into one dish, condense it down so that you can prepare for what you're going to purchase at the markets or the shops coming on later in the week. So first things first, we're going to look at, say, this lettuce, which looks pretty tired, pretty sad. But as you can see with these vegetables being wilted, the reason is they've lost moisture. The fridge is a dry environment, so you need to keep things hydrated or stored properly so they don't end up like this. But if they do, there's potentially a way back. So what we're going to do is have a look at anything that's kind of wilted and put it into a bowl of cold water and see what that does for it. Make sure the water's cold, otherwise if it's warm, it'll wilt the vegetable even further. So what we have here is some bread, some great bread, sort of a few days old, and some of them are a bit older than that as well. What I look at with bread is, one, you just want to check it for any molds or any sort of growths on it. If there's nothing there, then you can decide whether it's still good to toast or you want to actually prepare it for other things. So with this sort of bread here, we've got two different types. Sourdough with a very good crust. Generally what I would do or suggest for this is to take the actual crusts off, the end bits you can put into the fogo, but the centres, we can use those to make breadcrumbs. With these crusts here, you probably want to get into a manageable size before you put them into the food processor. If you don't have a food processor, what you can do is put them on a tray in the oven and dry them out at a low temperature, about 100, 110. Once they're nice and crispy, you can actually just break them up with your hands into a bowl and make a very rough sort of breadcrumb. And you can see that the texture of them is all different sizes. Once they're dried, they'll last a month or two in the cabinet. If they're cooked in butter or oil, maybe a couple of weeks. But you can always refresh them back in the oven. So that limp and dead-looking lettuce has actually come back to life just by a bit of icy cold water. Because lettuce and vegetables like this are really 90% water, when they wilt, they actually have lost that moisture. If you open up the ventricles or the tubes that allow them to absorb water and you put them back into water, that's exactly what they'll do. But you can see this is now crispy, crunchy lettuce again. And what I would do with this is just drain it off, put it back into a container, line with a bit of paper towel, and then put it back in the fridge, and you'll find that that will last probably for another 5 or 6 days. So here we can see we've got a lot of stems and a lot of, I guess, fibrous parts to the vegetables. What you have to do with these is actually cook them out. You need to break them down. There's a lot of nutrition and fibre in them. You can either get that by sautéing them or cooking them down in like a casserole or a stew. So here we have I guess we've got some silver beet, some celery, 1 leek, a bunch of spring onions, and the end of cabbage. This actually is probably the perfect base for a one-pot sort of braise. Some other stuff in the fridge what you can put in there, but what we do with this is basically get it all washed, chopped down, and just cook it out slowly. As you can see, there's always going to be a little bit of waste from what we have here. but at the end of the day, it's much less than what we actually started with. There's probably 80% of what was sitting on this bench here, which we'll end up using. But because the leaves cook differently, you need to remove them from the stems, so there's more fibre in the stems. As you can see, there's a leaf here that's slightly oxidised. What that means is that it's been exposed to oxygen. There's a cut in the actual fibre of the plant, and it starts to brown off. That may look like an issue, but it's actually not. When you cook it, you won't even recognise that, and it's still usable. You want to make sure you cut these up into relatively small pieces. Because of the amount of fibre in it, it's going to help it cook down much more efficiently and release that water, and also release the flavour as well, which is important. So to cook this off, all you need to do is get a large saucepan, be olive oil, bring it up to heat and cook it down really slowly. What you're going to do is just want to get all that moisture out. So all those vegetables are on the bench and now in this pan. We've got the celery, the silver beet, the beetroot, the leek and the spring onions. What we're doing now is just cooking them out, get the sugars to caramelise and cook the moisture out as well. So we end up with a nice base or a vegetable base, very classic way of cooking flavour into a dish. The extent to which you cook this is really up to your own liking and taste. You want it more coloured or less coloured, but the aim is to get the moisture out. So it's nice and sort of just moist enough for you to then add something else to it, be it another ingredient, chicken, fish, beef, or just keep it purely vegetarian as well. This is good because with this we're going to add some chicken. We've got two types of chicken, just some chicken breast that's been cooked and also a chicken curry as well. So what we're basically going to make is a chicken and vegetable bake with some sourdough crumbs to go on top. With this here is basically just get a bit of liquid into it, and I'm just going to use a little bit of oil and water, and then I'll add the chopped chicken and the chicken curry and just sort of slowly stir it through. If you've got any leftover stock or anything else, a little bit of wine perhaps, that can go in. Basically we just want to moisten it before we put the breadcrumbs on and put it in the oven. So with chicken, you've got to be extra careful or a bit more vigilant. As we can see here, we've got a roasted chicken thigh. This is pretty safe. You can tell by the colour that it's been cooked to a core temperature, which means that there'll be no issues. What I would say with this is just to pick the meat off the bone. It falls apart pretty easily. And we're just going to chop this up very roughly. What you can also do, if you have enough chicken too, is once you've picked it off the frame, you can keep these bones and you can roast them in the oven to make a bit of a roasted chicken stock. The texture of this, because it's already cooked to a certain degree, won't matter too much. So it just goes into the pot. I'm going to stir that through. Once that goes in, you'll be able to actually make a fairly tasty sauce from that and bring it all together to simmer. It's before we put it in the oven and bake it with the breadcrumbs. If you find it is a little dry, you can adjust the moisture accordingly. But in a way, this is like a gratin or a bake. The reason I wait to taste it is I want to bring the chicken up to temperature. So once again, it's safe to consume and it hasn't come cold from the fridge. So once the chicken and vegetables are bubbling and boiling away, you've got what looks like a bit of a stew or a nice cooked wet down dish. To the top of this, I'm going to add some of these breadcrumbs we did earlier on, just scattered along the top. What this will do will just form a little crust on top and also soak up a bit of the moisture in the actual vegetable mixture and give it a bit more heartiness as well. To the top of this, I add a bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt, and put it in the oven. And this itself can be consumed today or tomorrow, quite simply on its own or as part of a larger meal. So here we have it. It's a gratin of lots of vegetable stems, some chicken curry, and some breadcrumbs on top. A lot of things were broken down today. What you got is a really tasty, nutritious, and interesting midweek meal. And bearing in mind that this is just an example of a technique of which you can do many other different things if you want, and it's really only limited by your imagination and what you have sitting in the fridge. So if you'd like to learn more about today and what we've done and other techniques and recipes, go to the Eat Well Tasmania website.